Hi, this is Crowfire Gaming. I'm here to explain my Mjolner FireCoC Inquisitor. This is the build that I've been playing since League start, and it has been excellent for me. I've cleared all content, including the release all feared at once. That one was a bit tricky because I spent so many Scour Elks just getting the mod that I put 2 extra proj on there and decided to go with it. I did die in that one, but I still completed it and got the challenge accomplishment. So let me explain how this build works. So this build primarily revolves around 3 items. Mjolner. Mjolner is a very fun, unique. It's been used by a lot of different people for builds. Mjolner is nice because when you strike an enemy, when you hit an enemy with a 0.15 second cooldown, you trigger socketed lightning spells. But I am fire conversion, and because I'm fire conversion, I can use Wave of Conviction, which is a lightning spell. It converts some of your damage to fire and lightning, and I'm fully converting the rest of it to fire. So it actually does pure fire damage, even though it's getting triggered with Mjolner. Now, I don't benefit from the lightning damage roll. It can roll up to 100% increased lightning damage. I don't benefit from that, but you do benefit from the physical damage because of Battlemage, and I'll show you the tree later. So that's Mjolner. The downside of Mjolnir is that it requires 412 strength to wield and 300 intelligence, which is a very steep price. But that's one of the reasons why this build works. So it's a combination of this item and Leadership's Price. Leadership's Price is a unique item found from the Twins contract in Heist. It's a unique contract. It's pretty rare at the beginning of the league. I think it took about a week and a half for one to even be on the market. I had a live search up for the whole time. But you can see the varying ranges here on the amulet. You notice right away that it can give you maximum fire, cold, and lightning res. Now, +3, +3, +3 is the highest roll. This is a very expensive amulet. I haven't used this for a long time, and you shouldn't expect to. I think this one cost me 30 Exalted Orbs. But because I was actually farming the Twins contracts to try to get one myself, I sold a lot of my old ones and actually made the money that way. But it can roll from -3 to +3. If you're on a budget, just look for +3 fire res. And then hopefully not less than 0 of maximum cold or lightning. You want fire res because this build uses Righteous Fire. So that's the important mod. Also, just getting one that's slightly positive is not very expensive. I have a couple listed that's +3 fire, +3 cold, +0 lightning, and those have been up for 2.5 Exalted Orbs for weeks and no one has bought them. So it's not that expensive to start out. So this, now, in addition to giving us a maximum resistances, which is obviously very strong, it has the main effect of you have Scorching Conflux, Brittle Conflux, and Sapping Conflux, while your 2 highest attributes are equal. Now, I'll explain what these alternate ailments do later, but this is Conflux. So that means all of your hits, all of your damage types that will apply this ailment. So for example, Brittle Conflux. Brittle is a cold ailment, and I'm doing only fire damage. But because it's Conflux, my fire damage is able to apply that ailment. And then of course the downside, cannot ignite, chill, freeze, or shock. I don't worry about that. I'm not doing any of that. So I think I said it's a combination of 3 items. That's a lie. It's Mjolner, Leadership's Price, and then a combination of the Inquisitor, Righteous Providence. So the Righteous Providence node gives you 1% critical strike chance per strength or intelligence, whichever is lower. It also gives you some strength and intelligence. So it naturally gives you +50 strength and int, which is very good for helping you achieve that really high requirement. And it gives you a large number of critical strike chance. So I have balanced attributes, which you need in order to make Leadership's Price work. Here you need, while your 2 highest attributes are equal, I obviously have strength and int equal because Mjolnir requires a lot of it. So I just make sure I have equal here, 416, 416. Now because this is equal, I get 416% critical strike chance. That crit caps me, and I'll explain why, but it uses Brittle Ailment. So because you have enough strength and intelligence to wield Mjolnir, and Brittle, you automatically have crit cap. Okay, so that's the basic of the build. Because you get you're going Inquisitor for this critical strike chance, you naturally go Pious Path, which gives you a huge amount of energy shield regeneration. Because of that, and because you get maximum fire res here, it seems like an obvious choice to run Righteous Fire. I'm just running it for damage, but that's a 30% more damage multiplier. Where is it? Here. Yeah, it's actually 39% more spell damage while you can sustain Righteous Fire. So that is essentially an extra support gem that's affecting both my Mjolner 3-link and my 6-link cast on crit setup. Okay, so real quick, alternate ailments. Scorching Conflux. Scorch is an alternate ailment that causes enemies to have 30% lowered resistance at maximum effect. I always am hitting maximum effect, except sometimes in the Simulacrum. Well, in Simulacrum, I get between a half and 2/3 effect in the final waves against the Kosis or Omniphobia. If you really want to farm Simulacrum, you can invest more in non-damaging ailment effect, and you'll be able to do that. But for everything else, Maven, Shaper, Uber Elder, all of it, Scorch applies negative 30% all resistances. So that's like an Elemental Pen Link. Again, that's essentially another support gem. Sap. Sap is a very straightforward, useful ailment. It makes enemies deal 20% less damage while they're affected by sap. That's essentially a fortify effect. It's very close to that, and this build cannot get fortify anymore, but sap still gives you 20% reduced damage taken, essentially. Now, Brittle. Brittle is what makes alternate ailments insane for cast on crit builds. Brittle gives you plus 15% base critical strike chance. You can get up to 2% on an elevated Hunter or Elder mod on a chess piece, but Brittle gives you up to 15% base just because you have the ailment. So you want to make sure that you always have this ailment. Now, if you want to do a quick napkin calculation, Brittle gives you plus 15% base crit. Mjolnir has 5% crit chance. Add those together, that's 20% crit chance. Righteous Providence, I have around 400 strength, 400 int. That's 400% increased critical strike chance. 400% plus the 100% base is 5 times multiplier. 20% critical strike chance here times 5 is 100. So if you have over 400 strength and 400 int and max effect Brittle, you will always crit, assuming you can hit your enemy, which is a bit of a problem sometimes because accuracy is hard to get. But assuming you hit them and you have decent accuracy, you will always crit, which makes it very reliable to use a cast on a crit setup. So let me show you my passive tree real quick. I am Inquisitor. Now you can go out either this side or this side. Both of them work. It just depends on what you want. We are using a Glorious Vanity Doriani jewel, where you can see here bathed in the blood of some number sacrificed in the name of Doriani. The only effect that name does is it tells you what kind of keystone you're going to get. We run Corrupted Soul, which allows 50% of non-chaos damage to bypass energy shield, and you get some extra energy shield based off of your maximum life. This is important because Inquisitor's Pious Path makes your life regen also apply to energy shield regen. Normally, your energy shield is not really going to be regenning at the same time as your life, because energy shield... because your energy shield needs to be completely depleted before your life takes damage, but Corrupted Soul means that it happens at the same time. So you want about equal life and equal energy shield, and this keystone allows you to regenerate both at the same time, which greatly increases your recovery rate. Yeah, so we're running that Doriani Jewel. We're going to run up here. You can go out this way if you have good small passives here. I do not. These are pretty much useless, and I want the strength instead. So I go out the south side of Templar. Head up here. This gives you strength into energy shield. We're going to be looking for life. Some attack speed where it's close by is great. I'm pathing this way through which the only thing to make sure for your Doriani Jewel is you get the keystone with Doriani, and you get some decent notable here. Now, some ones that you could look for are Ritual of Flesh, which is what I have, which is some life and life regen, which obviously is good for our double effective regen on life and ES. You can also look for Ritual of Might. That gives you up to, I think, 30% physical damage and 4% chance to deal double damage, which is, it's a huge damage notable. It's actually probably better than this. I need to look for a better one. You could get life leech on here. Fire damage leeched as life is an option. Or you could get maximum fire res. I don't think that one's that useful, but if you need some resistances, and you can get +1 max fire res here. Pick up the life and mana. The mana, it helps a lot because we don't really get it elsewhere. And then path all the way over here to Pain Attunement. I am a Petrified Blood build, so I'm always on low life, so you get 30% more spell damage here. That's essentially another support gem. Have you been counting how many support gem worth of buffs we have? Pick up Melding because the new Melding is great for hybrid builds, and the Jewel Socket. Then on this side's got a bit more going on. You can path through the Dexterity or the Strength, whichever you like. Originally, I was going through Holy Dominion, pathing up here. But once I didn't need the resistances anymore, it became slightly less efficient to do so. But pick up these 2 points, that's great. If you're having mana problems and don't have enough reduced mana, you can pick up Righteous Decree or path through Righteous Decree with these 3 points. It'll save you 1 travel point anyway to go through these 3. So it's basically 2 points for, 4, 7, 13% reduced mana cost of skills, which is actually a very large amount. That'll make your skills pretty much free if you have a minus mana craft on your ring. So if you're having mana problems, path through here. Then I come down here, you pick up Tireless, which is more reduced mana cost. I am max block, so I'm picking up Sanctuary, which gives you some elemental resistance, which is very useful because it saves less suffixes. Glancing Blows. Glancing Blows is only worth it if you have a life recovery on block shield, which you should definitely aim for. That's one of the most important defensive layers. After that, I do come down and I grab Combat Stamina. It's pretty good. It gives you some life regen, armor, and maximum life. But more importantly, we get the Armor Mastery. Now, most of the time, I would take the Mastery of you take 30% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. But because of my aura setup, I need my Determination to have increased mana reservation efficiency. You path over here to Iron Will. Iron Will is about a 12% more multiplier. In total, because we have a lot of strength, Iron Will is very effective at giving us spell damage. Obviously, you pick up Constitution. Then I go down here, pick up Avatar Fire, and go to Barbarism. Barbarism gives you some maximum life, resistances, and max fire res, which is good for Righteous Fire. The life is pretty much worth it here. It's basically averaging out to 4% maximum life per point for these 3 points. But you also get 10 strength, and you get quite a bit of resistances and max fire res, so it's definitely worth it to pick this up. I really want to pick up Hardy if you path a different way or do something with your Cluster Jewel. You can path down here, pick up Barbarism, and then pick up Hardy. That will give you a lot of regen. It might be worth it to do that. Then, of course, you come down here. I grab Versatility because accuracy is a big problem, and this also gives you some movement speed and dexterity and intelligence. Movement speed feels really good on Cyclone. Dex and intelligence are both stats that we really need, so I picked this up. Then, of course, you get the life nodes and this life regen and strength node. Before you anoint Prismatic Skin for +2 all elemental resistances, you can path down here, 1, 2, 3, path through the fire res for 5 points. So it's actually not very far away. Honestly, if you are level 100, you might want to path down here anyway, and then either anoint Soul of Steel, you could anoint Crystal Skin, or, wow, this one gets covered up by my Doriani Jewel. But you could probably anoint Soul of Steel. I wouldn't. I think that the points probably aren't worth it because you're high enough. But because the closer you get to elemental resistance cap of 90, the more effective each point is, it might be worth it to really pound out the last couple points to get as close to 90% as possible. Okay, and then on this side, I do grab Divine Shield. I have a lot of armor, about 25k armor, and I block. Divine Shield does work with block. Here it says you cannot recover energy shield above armor. Not a problem. I have 25,000 armor. I wish I had 25,000 energy shield. And then 3% of physical damage prevented from hits is regenerated as energy shield per second. Prevented from hits means that the Glancing Blows block does affect this, as does all the armor. So that is my damage prevented. So this is giving me a huge amount of energy shield regen. Coming up here, Devotion is great. You must pick up at least one of these either Divine Judgment or Divine Fury. I pick up both because the damage is so efficient in order to get this Elemental Mastery. Now, the reason why this build does not need Pain Seekers anymore, the gloves, is because you can get a lot of increased effect of non-damaging ailments on the tree. Since I path to both, I get 20% effect here of non-damaging ailments, and then taking the Keystone will unlock the Mastery. This Mastery, you can get 40%, so you're at 60% total from this wheel. If you need more, you can get it on boots, you can get it on a ring, you can get it as a corruption on jewels. You can get up to 7 or 8% as a corruption on jewels, which would actually be pretty nice, especially to help with simulacrums. But you can do that. The Critical Strike Mastery also has 50% increased effective critical strikes, or of ailments you inflict with critical strikes. So depending on how you're figuring out your critical strike situation, that also will cap you, especially if you're doing simulacrum. Finally, I do grab Faith and Steel. At different points while I've been leveling, I take Sanctum of Thought because you get reduced extra damage from crits, which is a very strong defensive mechanic. But at the moment, I'm taking Faith and Steel. Gives you some elemental resistances, which is great. And you want to make sure to get the defend with 120% of armor while not on low energy shield. You're almost never on low energy shield because of how high your regeneration is with Divine Shield and the Pious Path Inquisitor node. So here it's essentially just means 20% more armor always. That is a huge effect. It's not counted in your character screen, but because it's defend with 120%, not gain 20% more. So it's not counted in your character screen, but it is always in effect, essentially. We do pick up Sovereignty because I fit in a lot of auras. For the Mastery, I pick up the increased mana reservation efficiency of skills, but that's only possible because I have a Helm Corruption that is socketed skill gems get a 90% cost and reservation multiplier. That means that my Arrogance, which is reserving Herald of Ash and Precision on my life, does not reserve over 50% of my life. Arrogance, a level 21 gem, has a 200% mana multiplier, which means that if you only reserve Herald of Ash, a 25% reservation aura, you will be at exactly 50%. I want to also reserve Precision and always make sure I have slightly less than 50% reserved, so like 49%. And that's only possible with that Helm Corruption or some other increased reservation efficiency of socketed gems. So I was using a 30% increased life reservation efficiency of skills for a long time, and you use that with Herald of Ash, Precision, and Vitality can all go on your Arrogance support gem. Then, of course, you pick up Purity of Flesh. Last Masteries for life, I pick up 2% of life regenerated per second while moving. 2% is quite a large number, actually, so that's pretty strong, especially for sustaining Righteous Fire and for regenerating life and energy shield. And I pick up plus 50 flat life because 50 flat life is always worth the passive point. If you're not picking this up, you should be on every single life build. Okay, last thing that's going on is the Cluster Jewel. So I run a Cluster Jewel here. I go up these armor nodes because armor is, at least somewhat useful. On my Cluster Jewel, you have a lot of options. I run a spell damage Cluster Jewel. I run it with Conjured Wall to give me plus 6% chance to block spell damage if you've cast a spell recently. You've always cast a spell recently because of your Molten Shell on left click or your Blood Rage or your Frostblink. You're always casting a spell recently. So this gives me spell cap, spell block cap, and some damage. I also run Essence Rush. Essence Rush gives me some Energy Shield Leech, which I don't get from any other source. It also gives you some attack and damage while you're leeching Energy Shield. Great, so that gives me Energy Shield Leech, so now I have Fire and ES Leech. Then I'm running 2 Megalomaniacs. Now, Megalomaniacs are a luxury item, but they are much cheaper than they should be. My Megalomaniacs, I never paid more than 1 Exalted Orb for them, and regularly less, and I picked up quite a few that I've swapped between. You're looking for at least 2 stats on each Megalomaniac, and the way to tell whether a Megalomaniac is good, in my opinion, is they're only worth it because you give up the jewel socket of a normal medium cluster jewel. They're only worth it if they give you notables that you cannot otherwise have. So for me, I want multiple effects of small notable cluster jewels because I want maximum resistances. Normally, if you want to get Prismatic Dance, which is +1 to all maximum resistances, you can only get that on a small cluster jewel. So at max, I could get 2 of these notables. But on a Megalomaniac, you can pick up multiple small cluster jewel notables on the same one. You can also pick up large cluster jewel notables that you couldn't get otherwise. For example, one of the best notables that I don't currently have equipped on my Megalomaniacs is Feed the Fury, which gives you 15% attack speed and 40% damage while you're leeching life. And we're always leeching life because we're petrified blood and we have less than 50% life reserved. So that is a huge damage multiplier if you need the attack speed. It's a very easy solution. It's one of the best notables you can get. But that's only available on large cluster jewels. But my large cluster jewel is spell damage here that cannot get this attack notable, so get it on a Megalomaniac. So the most important notables to get on Megalomaniacs is Wrapped in Flame. This gives you, cannot be chilled, so we get chill immunity. It gives you some fire damage, which is great, not a small amount either. And the most important, 5% chance to cover enemies in ash on hit while you are burning. Because we're using Righteous Fire, we're always burning. And since we're cast on crit with 2 different spell casting setups, where if we're attacking 6 times a second, then we're casting 12 spells a second, so we're hitting 18 times a second. That's basically 20 times a second, and if you have a 5% chance, 20 times 5 is 100, so you basically guarantee to cover an enemy with ash on hit if you attack them for at least a second. And you can see here being covered in ash gives 20% less move speed, which is whatever, but 20% increased fire damage taken. That's equivalent to having a extra skitterbot shock following you around all the time. So Wrapped in Flame gives you chill immune, fire damage, and 20% increased fire damage taken to enemies. It is the best damaging notable to get on the Megalomaniac. The other notables you want to look for are anything that gives maximum resistances. So I have 2 Prismatic Dance, but Prismatic Carapace also gives you 30% armor and +1 maximum all resistances. You can get Molten One's Mark. Molten One's Mark is a notable that gives you +2 maximum fire res and 1% life regen. That is also very strong. My current notables, I'm using Prismatic Dance, Wrapped in Flame, and Battle Hardened. Battle Hardened gives quite a bit of physical damage, and it also gives evasion and armor. And then I'm using, while I'm in a unique situation, you can look for Blacksmith. Blacksmith gives you armor, fire resistance, and fire damage leech to his life. The fire damage leech can come from either your Doriani Jewel notable. It can come from a Watcher's Eye with leech damage if you're using Vitality. So you can get a Vitality Watcher's Eye that gives you all damage leech, or you can get it from Blacksmith. Technically, you can also get it from a Helmet Corruption, but I would much rather have the Mana Reservation Multiplier than Fire Damage Leech. But because this also gives you armor and fire resistance, both stats that we can very much put to use. Then I also run another Prismatic Dance for +1 max all res, and Arcane Adept. Arcane Adept gives you 5% attack speed while channeling, makes your channeling skills deal more damage, which I don't use, but most importantly gives you Arcane Surge. There's 2 sources of Arcane Surge outside of for this build, outside of the Arcane Surge support gem, which again I was using for a very long time. And that is this, and there's one other Cluster Jewel notable that gives you Arcane Surge, a chance to get Arcane Surge when you hit a rare or unique enemy. But I use Arcane Adept because it was available on Megalomaniacs. All Megalomaniacs are different, so do not look for these exact ones if you want to run this build. Just look for some with good stats. There's one more notable that's very good, and that's, I believe, it's the Culling Strike against cursed enemies. Notable. So just getting Culling Strike for free would be better than some of these, but I haven't found one that exists or is affordable. So that's my Cluster Jewel. You can set up differently. I did test using a Fortify setup. I used this Cluster Jewel, aggressive defense hits, fortifying hits grant 60% increased fortification, and combined it with Overlord, which guarantees that you get Fortify, and even with both of these, with a high physical damage roll Mjolnir, I could not get any Fortify stacks. I got 1 or 2 on occasion against white mobs, but the Fortify is just pretty much beat, even if you're heavily investing into it. So that's quite sad, but we still have strong defenses. So that is the passive tree. Avatar, Fire, Glancing Blows, Divine Shield, all strong. Pain Attunement for the essential extra damage link, and finally Corrupted Soul are the keystones. Okay, I know this is getting long, but there's a couple more things to talk about. Real quick, my Ascendancies. I already talked about Righteous Providence, and I talked about Pious Path, but one quick thing to note is Sanctuary, Consecrated Ground you create applies 15% increased damage taken to enemies. That is scaled by the 50% increased effect of Consecrated Ground you create effect on Pious Path. So this 15% increased damage taken is actually multiplied by 1.5 because of this increased effect of Consecrated Ground. Now, I use an Phantasmal Purifying Flame, whose alternate quality effect gives you up to 20% increased effect of Consecrated Ground. That increased effect of Consecrated Ground also applies to this 15% increased damage taken. It also applies to the Consecrated Ground from Purifying Flame, applies 9% increased damage taken to enemies, Helmet, Enchant. This one is scaled by both the Phantasmal Purifying Flame and the 50% effect here. So you can get quite a lot of effective Consecrated Ground, which will scale the Helmet enchantment and this node. Now there's one other source, there's two other sources. You can get a Bottled Faith. Bottled Faith also has the same wording as Consecrated Ground you create applies a certain amount of increased damage taken, and it scales with the 70% total increased effective Consecrated Ground. There's also a Watcher's Eye mod that has Zealotry, causes Consecrated Ground to have, I think, up to 15% as well. You could go a Zealotry version to utilize that Watcher's Eye mod. You'll get quite a bit of damage out of it. But I go a more defensive version, but that's a more offensive version of the tree. Finally, because I'm running Mjolnir and Fire, I am using Instruments of Virtue. Now, Instruments of Virtue, we don't care about the attack damage, we care about Battlemage. Battlemage adds the flat damage from Mjolnir, which is actually not bad. It's 131 to 244 physical damage. It adds that damage to my spells. And both Wave of Conviction and Purifying Flame have huge damage effectiveness numbers. Purifying Flame is 200%, Wave of Conviction is 240. And Mjolnir, it comes out to being about 30% more damage. So it's, yet again, another support gem's worth of damage. So if we count this out, Mjolnir is only a 3-link, unless you have the Squire, of course, but Mjolnir is a 3-link. We don't get the lightning damage here, but we get 30% more damage from Battlemage, we get 30% more damage from Pain Attunement, and we get 39, so about 40% more damage from Righteous Fire. So if you count that up, it's essentially a 1, 2, 3, it's about a 6-link worth of more damage multipliers. And then, of course, the actual 6-link then also gets those, so that's about a 9-link. So that's how we're getting a lot of our damage. That's how we're scaling it with the tree. Now, a lot of people might want to go Inevitable Judgment. I don't go Inevitable Judgment because Scorch lowers enemy resistances. Remember, we're using alternate ailments. If you use Scorch, it's minus 30% elemental resistance. If you go lightning damage, or if you use Inevitable Judgment, you will be wasting the 30% lowered elemental resistances, which is not the end of the world. You can waste it, but I choose not to. That's why I go Fire Conversion, and also then you can utilize Battlemage. Okay, now real quick, you'll notice that on my tree, I don't take any critical strike nodes. The only ones that you could take are here, which is not bad, but I choose not to because I'm capped crit with Righteous Providence and Brittle. Because of that, I have no critical strike multiplier. Now, you can get double critical strike multiplier jewels, but they're very expensive and it will cost you a lot. You can get a Watcher's Eye with Precision mod that gives you critical strike multiplier. I just ignore all that. I use the Malagara's Gloves. Malagara's Gloves gives you 300% critical strike multiplier even. It is not modifiable. You just have 300% critical strike multiplier. Now, from my tree, I only get 10. That's the only critical strike multiplier that's here. So that means these gloves basically give me 140% critical strike multiplier. That's it. You don't have to worry about critical strike other than that. You can choose not to use these gloves and instead invest in critical strike multiplier, but this is by far the easiest solution. And because it's unique, you can get a corruption. For me, I get +1 level of gems so that I can level up my Enlighten. Good. So that is Malagaros. Then for my main damage setup, I'm using Wave of Conviction and Purifying Flame. I already explained these. Wave of Conviction, you just use the regular support. It gives straight elemental damage. I link this with Awakened Ele Focus and Awakened Added Fire Damage. Added Fire Damage is a very good support gem for this build. And one of the best things about it is it gives +1 level of supported physical skill gems.
Awaken Elemental Focus also gives +1 level of supported elemental gems. It's just only at level 5, so I'm not quite there yet. But that's essentially +2 levels and a lot of damage to Wave of Conviction. Now I use Elemental Focus because the Wave of Conviction deals less damage than the Purifying Flame, and that means that the ailments it would inflict would always be lower. So the Purifying Flame would always take priority, so we don't care about inflicting ailments with the Wave of Conviction. On my Phantasmal Purifying Flame, I do have a level 21. I bought and leveled the gems myself. I run Divergent Inspiration. This supports both your Cyclone, because you have to use Cyclone to trigger your cast on crit setup. I use Divergent Inspiration. It has 44% reduced mana cost of skills, as well as some elemental damage. And some critical strike chance if you're ever doing 100% delirious maps and you're not at capped Brittle. I run Divergent Cyclone. For those who don't know, Divergent Cyclone gives you more movement speed, but it's not necessary. You can just use regular old Cyclone. Again, Awaken added fire damage, +1 level. Divergent Cast on Crit. Now, Divergent Cast on Crit is almost a obsolete skill gem, or a support gem, because Awaken Cast on Crit exists, and it's very expensive. But Divergent Cast on Crit is actually better for us, because Awaken Cast on Crit gives you increased cooldown recovery, which is very good for your Cast on Crit setup, but because we're using Mjolner and the 6-link Cast on Crit, the Awakened Cast on Crit does not increase the cooldown of the Mjolnir skill. So if you want equal cooldowns to be able to scale them, you cannot use cooldown reduction on the gem. So because of that, I use Divergent. Divergent just gives you free 10% attack speed, which is actually huge for Templar, because Templar is hard to access attack speed. So 10% there is great. It's a very cheap gem. Finally, Awaken Fire Pen. I found this to be the best support gem. If you're not using the Malagara's Gloves, increased critical damage, or increased damage with critical strikes is probably the best support gem for you to use. Great. Then, those are the main damage setups. Now, for defenses, the largest form of defense is elemental resistances. You can see here I have 88, 87, 85. These will vary depending on your megalomaniacs, depending on your gear, but this is what I hit. This is why I was saying it might be worth it to actually path down to Prismatic Skin and anoint something else, because you could get to 90 or very close to 90 if you did that. And if you go from 89% to 90%, that's essentially a 10% less damage taken, which is very different from 75 to 76, which is about a 4% less damage taken. So once you're high in elemental resistances, it makes a lot of sense to keep going. But anyway, so we get elemental resistances. We get maximum from Leadership's Price, max fire res. Another way to get a lot of maximum is the Prismatic Skin Anoint, which is here. And then finally, you can get +2 to all maximum resistances, including Chaos, on a Shaper Shield. This is another huge defensive layer, pushing our resistances up as close to the 90 cap as possible. But the main defense that I'm using actually is Life on Block. Because I'm max block, using Tempest Shield and using some notes on the tree, 5% life recovery on block is one of the best ways to keep your life. And because we're Petrified Blood and at low life, really our life pool is only half as high, but our life total is still the same. So when it says recover 5% of life when you block, it's actually 10% of my unreserved life. So every time you block, you get 10% of this half refilled. So it's a huge defensive mod, and that is the biggest thing you should be looking for on your shield. The second thing you should be looking for is all maximum resistances. Third thing is a high life roll. Now, I'm going against my own advice. I'm still using an Ezomite Tower Shield base, which is good because the implicit gives you 40 life, which is almost a decent life roll on its own. But mine life roll is low, but this shield is too perfect for me to pass up. It gives me Socketed Gems have 30% increased restoration efficiency, which allows me to do some funky things with my auras. Squeeze an extra one in. I also got lucky and have +2 max cold res here. You don't need that. The main stats to look for is life, all res, and life when you block. You can get this shield for 2 Exalted Orbs. Not this one specifically, but you can get a shield with the last 2 mods listed here for 2 Exalted Orbs. If you want a high life roll, maybe it'll cost you 5, but it's a solid shield and you don't need to replace it ever. Good, so that's the defensive layering. The only thing on top of this is what we already talked about in the passive tree. But you can see my armor without flasks is 25k. Because I managed to fit in Grace, and because my Megalomaniacs give me a lot of evasion, I have 2 Prismatic Dances, and Battle Hard gives me 30%. You combine that with Defiance Banner, which gives you another 50% armor and evasion, so that's about 150% evasion. I can't pass up using Grace. So I also have about 12k evasion without Flask. I'm running a Jade Flask, so with that I'm at 20k, 21k evasion. So that's all the defenses, and a bunch of life. Just get life on everything. It'll do you really well. Okay, next is my flasks. I'm running an Enduring Mana Flask. This is where I have my Corrupting Blood. I was using a Hybrid Flask, but Hybrid Flask consumes too many charges for my taste. It's too hard to refill with Flask charge recovery mods. So I just run this one. I bought it off someone for 7 chaos. It's not too expensive. I run a Jade Flask. Now, I have fallen in love with the Transgressors prefix. Transgressors prefix makes you gain charges when you're hit. I'm hit a lot, and this basically guarantees that you're in Simulacrum, you're fighting against a boss. These flasks will always be up. This is why I have capped Chaos Res all the time with my Amethyst Flask. I do need it to get capped, but it's always up because I gain 6 charges when I'm hit by an enemy. If you're fighting Chayula in the Feared encounter, Chayula is hitting you multiple times a second. You're always going to have your Amethyst Flask up. Otherwise, get increased evasion during Flask effect on your Jade Flask. I am running a Quicksilver Flask of the Cheetah. Ideally, you would want one with reduced charges used, because then it's easier to fill with a kind of flask charge when you deal a critical strike mod on either a Watcher's Eye or a Belt. But, my flask isn't perfect yet. Amethyst to help with Chaos Res, because you need a lot of help with that. And I run a Taste of Hate. You can choose what to put in your last one. I like Taste of Hate because it's a mix of offense and defense. You don't get the full offensive capability of the physical damage gained as extra cold. You get half of it because Avatar of Fire converts half of your cold damage to fire damage. So it's essentially 7% physical damage as extra cold, which is still not bad at all. There's probably 5%, 6% more damage. But it also gives you 15% physical damage from hits taken as cold damage. This is another huge way to mitigate physical damage. Having the Taste of Hate up, it lasts 10 seconds. Having it up gives you 20% less cold damage taken. So this flask gives you, a huge amount of cold and physical damage mitigation, and it gives you some extra damage. And it lasts forever. I like this one. You can use Bottle Faith. It still does a lot of damage and gives you a lot of damage. And there are some other options that you can use too. Okay. Now, other gear, real quick. Obviously, you can see here I'm using a Crown of the Inward Eye. This is the best helmet for you. It gives you a lot of armor, a lot of energy shield, which is great. You want one. Ideally, you want one corrupted with socketed skill gems, get 90% cost and reservation multiplier corruption. Buy a cheap helmet as long as it has 18, 19, 20, 21 roll on the increased life, mana, and energy shield, all stats that we need. And you can corrupt it. You can sell the ones that don't land the corruption you want, vendor the bricked ones, but you can get this corruption. It is huge for allowing you to run multiple auras in your arrogance support. After that, you can pay a lab farmer on TFT to get you, or you can farm it yourself to get you this enchantment. So get the corruption first, then pay someone or do it yourself to get the enchantment. You do need a Tainted Offering. A Tainted Offering is an item. Let's see if I have one. I do. Tainted Blessing. Tainted Blessing allows you to enchant corrupted items from the Divine Font in the Labyrinth. So that's how you can get that enchantment. You can pay, I paid 1x to a lab farmer to get this, but it did take a day or two to get it, so I had to use a different helmet. But I think now you have to pay 2x. If the build gets popular, maybe 3 or 4. But either way, this is an endgame upgrade anyway. But the enchantment is a huge damage multiplier. Rings, you just want as much intelligence, life, resistances as you can get. Basically, yeah, intelligence is the hardest stat to get on this build, I think. So just make sure you get that. You do need to use a Curse Enemies with Flammability on hit ring. There are 2 options. You can use a fractured ring like this. You can get them pretty cheap and then craft on it. You want to use a Essence of Hysteria for endgame crafting. Essence of Hysteria gives you this first prefix that you see. It's gain 10% of physical damage as extra fire damage. That is affected by catalysts, so you can use elemental damage catalysts, and it will increase to 12%. So that's a big damage multiplier. Otherwise, get life and resistances. Chaos resistance is really hard to get on the build too, so try to get some of that. Good. Then there's the belt. The belt, you want to get as much life as possible. I will explain how to craft this belt later. It's actually pretty easy, although a bit expensive, but you want life, chaos res, flash charge when you deal a crit strike, and then intelligence, strength, anything like that. Okay, last is the... Well, I guess I still have boots, but I'll go over the chest right now. The chest piece is used to fill up my intelligence and resistances. Luckily, there are two very good mods that do both those things. The Warlord Elevated Resistance mod gives you all resistances up to 22%, and it gives you +1 to maximum all elemental resistances. Very good for my build. The Elevated Crusader or Shaper mod that gives you % intelligence also gives you +1 to socketed intelligence gems. Now I'm using intelligence spell as my main damage setup, so it's giving me +1 level to my damage spell. You woke orb these together, hope you get a good third suffix. I got lightning resistance at tier 2, which is I'm very happy with. After that, you can do some other things to get the prefixes set, but the main thing you want is maximum life as extra, maximum energy shield crafted on. Good, that one fills up a lot of your resistances. It gives you 34% all res, which is huge. And then last is the boots. Boots are a huge flex slot. I just use boots that gave me a lot of int and a lot of life and some movement speed and res for a long time. But eventually you can craft boots that give you tailwind, cooldown recovery rate, maximum fire res, movement speed, life. My gear is almost perfect. Obviously, you can get more perfect. It's not mirror tour by any means, but it's perfect for my version of the build. Okay, that is all the gear now. So the only things left to explain the other skill gems. The aura setup. Now, if you have all of my gear, so if you have the 90% cost and reservation multiplier corruption, and you have socketed gems have 30% reservation efficiency, you can run a truly huge amount of auras. You must use Herald of Ash. It is a huge damage multiplier. Grace is optional. I use Grace because I get a lot of evasion scaling from my tree from Defiance Banner. Determination, I would say, is mandatory. Plus, you can get Determination mana reservation efficiency on your Armor Mastery. But that gives you a huge amount of armor, 25k. Again, that's without the 20% more multiplier from the Armor and Energy Shield Mastery. So multiply this by 20% more, you're going to get over 30k armor. Petrified Blood is a must-have. This is what enables you to go low life. Precision, you need as high level as you can without going over 50% reservation with your Arrogance, because Precision gives you much, much needed accuracy. Accuracy is probably the one stat where I have still not quite perfected. Tempest Shield is required. That is necessary to give you shock immunity and to give you capped spell block. Defiance Banner gives you a lot of armor and it reduces enemy critical strike chance. Vitality, use whatever level you have mana for. I have 48 mana unreserved. I could probably level this up, but it's at level 1 at the moment. So it's not doing anything except enabling my Watcher's Eye. Most of my playthrough, before I got a 30x shield and stuff like that, I was using as high level, like level 20 Vitality, but I was not running Grace. And instead I was running Skitterbots. Skitterbots is a nice aura to have. It provides a defensive and offensive bonus, but since I could squeeze in Grace, I had to squeeze in Grace. Anyway, those are the aura setups. It takes all my keys and more: Herald of Ash, Grace, Determination, Tempest Shield, Defiance Banner, Petrified Blood, Vitality, and Precision. If you want to see how that's linked, I managed to squeeze out the extra auras because I have a level 4 Enlighten in +1 gloves. You link that with your highest reservation auras, which is Grace, Petrified Blood, Determination. You could swap out Grace for Zealotry if you have the Zealotry Watcher's Eye. That would give you a big amount of damage. In the helmet, you have to run your Arrogance support, Herald of Ash, and Precision, as high level of precision as you can. And then in your shield, if you have the 30% reservation efficiency, Defiance Banner, Tempest Shield, and your level 1 Vitality. So that's all the auras. Any other gems? There's Divergent, Righteous Fire. Divergent gives you buff grants 20% increased spell damage, which is 20% increased spell damage for free. So that's one upgrade. I use Anomalous Blood Rage to generate frenzy charges while I'm fighting against bosses. This solves a lot of your attack speed problems and is a big more multiplier if you can afford it, but it's pretty expensive. Otherwise, I use Increased Duration linked with Molten Shell and Frostblink. I was using my Arcane Surge here, level 1, before I needed to drop it and get Arcane Surge on a Cluster Jewel. Different Righteous Fire say it. So I think that's all the gems. Last is jewels. So one important thing, or one thing that you can get, is Strength and Intelligence on every jewel. That will help you meet your attribute requirements and give you more room to divine orb between something with a variance of 3 in order to make them equal. You want life, and I like blind on hit. Again, I have evasion. If I didn't have evasion, blind on hit wouldn't be that important, but it still is. Enemies have 20% less evasion rating. Now, that means you essentially have 20% more accuracy. So this is a big accuracy roll. If you don't need the Strength and Intelligence, you can get an even better jewel, one that looks like, where is it? One that looks like this. It gives you blind, life, energy shield, and accuracy. So blind and accuracy is best, but unfortunately I need this strength and intelligence, so I cannot use this 200 accuracy. Okay, so now I'm going to explain how to craft my gear. If all you want is how the build works, you've already covered it, but I'm going to go over the expensive crafting process now. So, there are 3 pieces of this build that you can craft very deterministically and are extremely strong. The easiest is probably the boots. All you have to do is take your Tailwind and your cooldown recovery mod. They don't need to be elevated. They can be if you want. Woke orb them together onto a pair of 2-tone boots, preferably one that gives you the option to roll intelligence, so it has to have an energy shield base. And you want them to be at least eye level 85. The reason why you want eye level 85 is that opens up +2 maximum fire res as a prefix. Now, I bought these boots for like 7x. I bought these boots but recrafted the prefixes myself. So I just wanted some intelligence on my suffix. So I did that. I had another pair of boots that gave me some fire res as a suffix, but I needed int. So I just bought these and then recrafted the prefixes. What you can do is once you have 3 suffixes, you craft suffixes cannot be changed. Then you use Harvest to re-roll fire. If you re-roll fire, you have a 1 in 3 chance of getting +2 maximum fire res. The other 2 in 3 chances give you +1 maximum fire res. Now, if you get +2, after that, you craft suffixes cannot be changed again. Then you use Aisling, the level 4 Katarina Aisling. So if you do that, she will have a chance to unveil to give you an unveil, and you want that annul effect. When you use Aisling, it adds a veiled mod but removes a random mod. Suffixes cannot be changed, protects your suffixes, but the maximum fire res can still be deleted. So what you want is to do this and get lucky. It's a 50-50. You want the Aisling to remove your suffixes cannot be changed mod and leave alone your fire res. If you do that, block some useless prefix that you don't want, unveil. I got movement speed and cannot be chilled. Ideally, you want movement speed and chance to gain onslaught on kill, and then just craft some life. The reason why you want onslaught on kill is because I currently have that as my corruption on my Mjolner, but if you had it on your boots, you don't need it on this and you can get a different useful corruption, like attack speed. I think maybe Culling Strike is an option. I'm not sure. So that's how you make the boots. The chest piece, I think I already explained it. So after you woke orb your elevated mods together, in order to craft the physical damage taken from hits as fire, all you have to do is the same thing. You lock your suffixes. Suffixes cannot be changed. You re-roll with Harvest. Re-roll fire with a fire modifier. That guarantees physical damage taken as fire. The T1 and T2 mods are equal, so on average it'll cost you 3 Exalted Orbs. to get this mod in T1. After you do that, you can do suffixes cannot be changed, and then use Iceling and do the 50-50. The useful unveils for the chest piece are 10% life and 10% mana, or I think up to 9% chance to block attack damage. There's some spell suppression you can get as well. All of that's fine. I haven't done it yet because I rolled some life roll, and if you have 2 prefixes and you do suffixes cannot be changed, Iceling, you have a chance to kind of have 6 mods. None of them are crafted, and that means you need to use Harvest, reroll keeping suffixes, and it just gets way more expensive. So I haven't done it yet. I have a little life roll in here. I'm happy. But you do want to craft maximum life as energy shield. Lastly, the belt. Now, the belt sounds the most complicated, but it's actually very easy. All you need is a 2 prefix, 2 suffix, Hunter, Stygian, Vice. If you have 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes, your 2 prefixes need to be both T1 life mods. If you have both T1 life mods, then you can lock your prefixes, reroll crit. And if you reroll crit, that will guarantee that you will gain the Flask charge on critical strike mod. After that, lock your prefixes, reroll chaos for chaos res, lock your prefixes, Iceling, get either hybrid elemental chaos res, or cooldown reduction, or strength and int, or whatever you want, and then craft what's left. Okay, there are some alternate build options, such as getting critical strike chance, or critical strike multiplier on the tree using the gem, and then you can swap out Malagaros. Shaper's Touch solves your accuracy problems, gives you a lot of some life, evasion, and accuracy. You can also use the Abhorrent Interrogation, which is a very interesting item. You can look it up and figure out how that works yourself. Or you can just use Rare Gloves with Culling Strike and fill up some of your int and resistance needs. You can also make a lightning version. You can use the same setup, just instead of physical fire conversion, you could path to, you don't want to use Inevitable Judgement, but you could use Augury of Penitence instead of Instruments of Virtue. You could do Ball Lightning Arc and still use alternate ailments. I just think the fire conversion is a better use of your Ascendancy. There are a lot of variations of this build, a lot of tree changes. Auras are all dependent on what gear you have. As a basic, I would drop Grace and then just keep it the same. That will solve all of your aura needs, or you can use Skitterbots. But otherwise, I'll answer questions and hopefully update the mod. This guide has gotten extremely long, but I'll include some more footage if you want it. Otherwise, check out the 4 guide, and thanks for listening.